Hello everybody and welcome to the BBN. I'm your host, Jagseer, Badhesha, and we're here with a special guest tonight, Harben Mahil. He's actually here to talk about the MI6 report recently released about the plane crash 6 months ago on the Coral Island. Am I correct?
Yeah.
Thanks
for having me, Mr. Jagseer. Here's the report. It's called Lord of the Flies. Now, the report starts by talking about the plane crash that occurred that they call the scar of the island.
Yes, I do believe I read about that in the report. It's actually very interesting because I feel as if it almost represents a sort of a rebirth of the children on the island.
Yeah, I think it represents a new beginning, which ultimately leads to the savagery that occurs on the island.
Yes, and if I remember, after they visit the scar, Ralph actually blows a conch shell, which summons all the boys together. And the conch almost becomes its own symbol of like a sort of civility. And they hold an election and for this sort of makeshift society. And this election, Ralph comes out as the chief of the group.
Yeah, that's correct. I think this is when we first see Ralph's attempts to create a civil society, especially later on in the report, when the society and civilization turns to savagery and just chaos.
Yes, and this chaos first starts showing up when the little ones create a revelation called the Beastie, which actually is almost a manifestation of their fears.
Correct. It's a little one that says that he saw a snake-like creature called the Beastie, and this especially scares the little ones. It also scares the big guns, but the big guns, being the leaders, try to convince the little ones that there actually is no monster, and that the little one that said there was just had a nightmare. And after this, just to create more hope and bring back your unification, Ralph proposes to create a signal fire, which kind of gives them a symbol of hope.
Yes, and I feel like that's a very good move by Ralph because it really reassures the children that they have actual hope of escaping from the island. But Jack and his hunters are more concerned with hunting, and eventually they come up with the idea to hunt the Beastie.
Correct.
And later on after this, Ralph and Jack disagree upon topics, and ultimately Jack separates the tribes and goes on in his own tribe, and Ralph is left with his own society.
Yeah, here we see the division between the animalistic group, the one that wants to hunt, led by Jack, who almost acts as like a dictator, and we have the more civilized group, more like a democracy republic, which is led by Ralph. And the next major thing that happens after this is the death of Simon. And Simon's basically a character very pure and innocent, and basically we see him emerge from the forest while the boys are having a reenactment of a hunt, which they do after every time they kill a pig. And in their frenzy, they go to kill, they think that Simon's the beast, basically. They only see his silhouette, they think he's the beast, they're in a frenzy, and they proceed to tear him apart and just jump on him, and he ends up dying.
Yes, and it's actually a very honest mistake because it's actually quite ironic as well, because Simon actually is the only one who knows the truth about the Beastie, that it's just a parachuter that they believed they saw and thought it was a monster, but he can't tell anybody because they ultimately kill him. And after that, actually, Jack proceeds to raid Ralph's camp to get Piggy's glasses, which are really almost a symbol of intelligence, and they actually use them to create the signal fire. And after they've come and raided the camp, Ralph is talking to Piggy, and he tells them that if Jack had simply asked to take the glasses, he would have simply given them to him. Then when Ralph goes to Jack's camp, they get into a conflict, and Roger, a young boy, actually rolls a large boulder down a hill and tries to kill Ralph, but Ralph avoids it, and Piggy gets hit by the rock. Am I correct?
Yeah, Piggy ends up dying. Piggy's the smartest one there. By killing Piggy, they've essentially killed off the intellectual part of the group. And after that, Rolf ends up being chased by Jack's group of hunters, and he ends up hiding in like a shrub, like a thicket. And Jack, to solve this issue, lights up the whole forest on fire. Rolf starts running away to the beach, and then he sees a naval officer out of nowhere, unsurprised, who saw the fire happening on the forest, and he tells the boys that they're Englishmen, they shouldn't be acting so savagely, so viciously with each other. But then he ends up realizing that he is also in another war. He's in the same situation these boys are in their war, and therefore it's ironic what he's saying. He feels like a hypocrite, basically. And the boys, realizing the shame, realizing all they've done, start crying, and the naval officer turns his back to think about everything that's occurred.
Yes, it's actually quite a sad story because the boys leave the island's war and they actually come home to a similar war.
Yeah, another war on
And,
top of the war they just left.
Yes, so that's pretty much how the report goes, and the boys come back to a war, and ultimately the boys, we don't know what happens, but I'm sure we'll figure out in the coming days.
Yeah,
Thanks for listening.
once
This has been Jagseer, Badhesha, and our special guest Harben, Mahil, and this was the BBN. We'll see you next time.
Thank you.